Hi, welcome to the BA 597 final project presented by myself, Whitney Juszczak. The Tableau dashboard seen before you was created using data on CO2 emissions per capita provided by the World Bank. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, as emissions increase, they build up and warm the climate, leading to hazardous changes around the world. We know CO2 emissions are harmful. We have that information. But with the Wonder model, we get to explore beyond the foundational understanding that CO2 emissions are a concern, and we get to focus on what indicators can be identified through the data. Once we make those observations of the data, we can seek answers to addressing the issue. Some of the key identifiers that we found in the CO2 emissions per capita data from the World Bank is that high-income countries, the Europe and Central Asia region, and then during the year 2000, there were high points of CO2 emissions during the year and in these regions and higher income countries. The graph to the far right corner has the information indicating that 2000 had the highest point of CO2 emissions. We have that identified right here. And it is also identifying Europe and Central Asian region as having higher CO2 emissions compared to other regions. This red line is the indicator for the year 2000 throughout, and you can see that there are other points of high emission rates throughout the year of 2000 in other regions as well. Over here, we have indicators of income level. So you can see that these red are the high income level, the yellow is the upper middle, and then we have the lower middle in the grayer section. You can see throughout them, if there is high income, South Asia does not have high income, but if there is a high income in the area, Sub-Saharan Africa is the only exception where the high income have the higher CO2 levels. Again, we can see here in the Europe and Central Asia that they have a higher CO2 compared to the other regions. And then if you want to look at Europe and Central Asia specifically, we have some key filters that we can use to get a better idea of that. So here we have Europe and Central Asia region specifically and the comparison of the income levels. So here we're seeing that the highest income level does have the higher CO2 levels. Here we have the map of the countries in the region. The redder areas have the higher CO2 levels. And then over here we have a map of all of the countries within the region and how they're landing. And all of these are a year representation. And so you can see that Luxembourg is the highest, and 2000 had significant CO2 emissions for Luxembourg within the Europe and Central Asia. If we go back to looking at all of the regions and we want to look at specifically the high income region alone, then we can see a comparison across the regions for the high income levels. We can see what that looks like for the CO2 comparisons of the high income countries and their regions, and then what that looks like on the map itself. And then if we wanted to look at the year specifically, we're looking currently at 2000, but if we wanted to see, for example, 2010, about in the middle, we can see what that looks like as things are progressing between the year 2000 and 2019. And so while all of this matters, we do know CO2 is important and it does have an effect on our environment. But it's really important because scientists believe that by identifying and addressing these key factors and exploring further why, for example, the year 2000 had the highest point of CO2 emissions, or why, for example, Europe and Central Asia region has such higher CO2 levels compared to other country regions. And then also why higher income areas have those higher CO2 emissions. If we can identify and look further into the data on those key indicators, the hope is to lower CO2 levels. And scientists do believe that by lowering CO2 levels, we can reduce the harmful effects and moving forward, possibly reverse some of the effects that we're seeing today moving into the future. Our goal is definitely lowering CO2 levels. When you lower CO2 levels, it improves air quality, which benefits our environment and our health as a whole.